Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EDU on Air. My name is Chris Hart, and I am delighted to be sharing a session with you today, being the challenge of change. So what I'm going to do, if that's okay with you, is I'm going to jump onto a slide deck and share my slide deck with you, and I'm also going to share a few other things as well as we go along. But let's get going. So this is a really weird, messy bit where it looks a bit like Doctor Who, which is quite exciting. And if I jump onto my slides, present. Hopefully you can see them now. Can I just suggest that if you see these slides in a blurry way, just make sure you drop onto the little cogwheel on the bottom right of your video stream, and that will give you the settings for quality. And if you select some kind of quality like 780p, then you should be able to see the slides nice and cleanly. Sometimes it defaults to looking at a lower resolution. So yeah, just jump on that cogwheel, click on that, and that will give you the high resolution view of the slides. So let's get going. So the challenge of leading change is part of our Education on Air festival, I'm going to call it today, which is a festival of learning. So there are tons and tons of sessions. Obviously, this session is brilliant, but there are so many other fantastic sessions. Even if you can't see them all today, make sure that you come back and you will be able to see them on demand after the event. So this session in particular is looking at the challenge of leading change. And it is a huge issue in schools nowadays because technological developments, we look at the pedagogical developments, and it's a really kind of interesting space that we're in, and it can be very, very challenging. So I'm going to give us some context. And in the agenda that we're going to look at today is the only constant. We're going to talk a little bit about unshakable vision and agile leadership, talking the language of learning, the SAMR lens, and TPAC and professional learning. So that's kind of our agenda for the next half hour. Please feel free to drop me some questions in the Q&A app, which is underneath this video. I'll do my absolute best to answer those for you throughout this presentation. So let's get going. So as with when I was teaching, so I used to teach French, Spanish, emerging technologies, and learn to learn and design thinking. So all very exciting subjects in a secondary setting. But when I was setting my lesson objectives and my lesson outcomes, and then I would often focus on knowledge. You know, by the end of this French lesson, you will be able to conjugate the past perfect tense of être or something exciting like that. But then I realized that, you know, far beyond what I'm doing in my French lessons, I'm also helping children to develop mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets. And so in the last two jobs I've worked in schools in the UK and in Australia, I've really tried to focus on how do we have a shared common language of learning. And that really, really helps when we're looking at transformation and change. So for this session, the knowledge set that you guys are going to have by the end of it, I hope, is you're going to have a deeper understanding of the challenge of leading change, and you're going to have an understanding of the SAMR and TPAC model. So that's the knowledge bit. But beyond that, you know, we're not just teachers of subjects, we're not just teachers of literacy, we are teachers of children and young people and adults. I want to talk a little bit about the mindset. So I do want you to have a growth mindset. So some of the things that I share with you today, maybe you're going to think in my context, but have that growth mindset of, you know, giving it a go, having the yet attitude, also looking for help. Now we're connecting on a platform with thousands of people today, thousands of educators, especially in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm sure my mum's watching in the UK, are connecting to this, and it's a wonderful community we've got. And jump on Twitter on the hashtag Google EDU on air, and make sure that you have a look at the community that's discussing all this stuff as well. So if you do get stuck, part of a growth mindset is look for help. Find a community who can help you, and we've certainly got that around this event today. Be reflective, because I'm going to share with you the way I've tackled challenges of change in schools, but obviously you have to think about your context. And also I want you to be courageous and take on the idea of change, which can be scary, and really run with it. The skills you guys I want to use today are a bit of analysis. I want you to look at what's going on and look at your situation. Some communication, so please feel free to get on the Q&A, get on the and a little bit of planning. You know, you could go away and think, right, how am I going to use some of these ideas in my school next week? And finally, the tools we're using, the EDU on Air platform, which you're all on, which is wonderful. The SAMR tool, the TPAC, and the Kübler-Ross change curve. So they're just a couple of tools I'm going to share with you, which help you to manage change. So just as a kind of tip, I guess, when I'm setting out my objectives, when I'm teaching children or when I'm working in workshops with adults, it really emphasizes it's not just about the knowledge we'll get, That's really important, but it's also about the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set. And while the knowledge from a French lesson is not transferable necessarily to your science lesson, the different mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets are transferable across a school. And if there was one thing I would say to people about transformation and change in schools, it's you have to have a common language around it. And this actually gives you a common language around learning. So that's my tip number one. So as we know, the only constant is change, and any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Now, you guys are on a Google for EDU today, so a lot of you, I imagine, will be using some of our wonderful technology like G Suite and Chromebooks and things. The first time I sat on a Chromebook and got into a dock and was collaborating with someone, and this was actually the example of someone in New York, in the University of Rochester, and I'm sitting in Melbourne. It just blew my mind. I work with and the teachers I work with now who've used G Suite for a while, it's kind of common practice. So the idea of, of course I can collaborate with somebody online in a document flawlessly and concurrently. And it's a really kind of an amazing magical experience for some of us, but for the children that we're working with, I think, it's almost taken as given. So I'm just going to show really quickly a couple of bits of technology. And normally I would do this as a bit of a quiz, but I'm guessing you know what these are. This is a self-driving car from Google, and they're being test driven in Adelaide, I believe, at the moment. So I'm sure we'll see them in our streets very soon, which is a project from Google where they can launch a hot air balloon up to 10 kilometers into the atmosphere. And that actually gives out free Wi-Fi, free high-speed Wi-Fi over 150 kilometer radius. So if you imagine in an earthquake scenario where cell towers have gone down, you could potentially still keep people connected. This is magical technology. This is a project which has been worked on. I think it's actually been put on the back burner now, but Project Iris was a project where people were looking at how could you use, instead of a pinprick blood test for diabetics to look at their blood sugar level, how could you use a contact lens which monitors the salinity in your eye or monitors the moisture in your eye and connects to a smartphone telling you what your blood sugar level is. That's magical technology. This is one of my favorite new bits of Google tech, at least, and I'm going to share it with you later on. This is the new Google Earth. Australia, I'm from England, and Australia is a long, long way away from my folks back home, and it's sometimes difficult to take Australian children out of Australia and overseas to visit things. But the new Google Earth allows an incredible richness to learning, where you can go and visit all different kinds of places. And again, I love this little GIF/GIF, depending. We're not going to start that argument, but the ability to work together and collaborate on docs no matter where you are, it's like magic. In Google Expeditions and Google Cardboard, make sure you jump on and find that, because it is an incredible way to take kids on immersive field trips, I guess. And I just want to say this is a quote I stole from my friend Chris Betcher, who's presenting later on, I believe, at 1:30. So definitely jump on his presentation. He always says, imagine the technology, or think about the technology that your children in your schools have got in their hands now, technology they will ever have. So this idea of, I'm pretty old, I think now, I feel old sometimes, but I was using a Spectrum 48K and cassettes on my computer, and now kids are able to access 360 immersive video through a mobile phone and a piece of cardboard. So incredible technologies helping us develop our learners. And this is one of my favorite bits of very, very high-tech tech. And the high-tech tech here is indeed a bookcase, and this is specifically the Billy bookcase. And the Billy bookcase is a IKEA product, and there is one produced every 3 seconds. And the reason there's one produced every 3 seconds in the world is that every single Billy bookcase is produced in one factory in Sweden, where the entire workforce is robotic. Now, there are humans who work in this factory, but they're there to fix the robots and to fix the computers if they break. But the actual making of that furniture is now done by robotics. And if you didn't get to see the wonderful keynote we had by Jan Owen this morning, I really recommend you have a look at that. She talks about the changing world that our 5-year-olds, who in 2030 will be out in that workforce, the changing world of work. And while some people might be frightened of that and think, oh my goodness, robots, it's going to be Terminator and Judgment Day, it actually presents incredible new opportunities. And it's up to us as educators to be agile and be able to really communicate that with all of our staff, so that they understand that that technology is changing, and that technology is really pushing the way we do things in schools and forcing us to be different. So shift does happen, and we know that's happening. And I just want to show you the Kubler-Ross change curve. And it looks like this. And this actually comes from any kind of big change is often our morale and competence, which is on the y-axis, and time across the x-axis. Like when we have a big change, like for example, if you come and you bring in a whole school fleet of Chromebooks, managed Chromebooks, like it can be shock. Oh my goodness, we've suddenly got all of these children in our school have got a one-to-one device. It can be denial, like disbelief. I can't believe this is happening. It could be frustration. It's like, oh my God, things are different. That makes me angry. I don't like it. And then depression. You're like, oh, this huge change. And then it's like experimentation. Okay, I'm going to start playing with these Chromebooks. It's like, oh, this is interesting. And then some decision like, okay, actually, this is the new kind of normal now. This is helping me to feel more positive. And suddenly I realize I'm now using G Suite and Chromebooks in my classroom, and it is the new normal. Now, the problem with this is I do not want my workforce, in inverted commas, my teachers and the people in my school, to feel that shock, denial, frustration, depression. I think it's so important that we don't put our teachers and the people who work in our schools through that. We really want to focus on experimentation, decision making, learning how to work in the new situation. And integration, it just becomes the new norm. So how do we ensure that we don't live in that red side of the Kubler-Ross change and that we start on the front foot? So what I'm going to say is one big message: start with why. If you come into a school, and I think I've done this as an e-learning coordinator back in the UK, I got very excited by iPads when they came out, and we grabbed a bunch of iPads and we chucked them into a classroom. And I was very excited, and the teachers were like, what is going on? You've suddenly given these children with no planning, no forethought, and I don't even know why you're giving them this piece of technology. And to be honest, it didn't work out very well. It was a bit of a disaster, and we were in the denial stage and we were in the shock stage. So I think the really big thing that I missed out in that moment, and I hope I haven't done it since, is I didn't start with why. Why are we giving devices to our young people? Why are we allowing our young people to access software which allows them, like G Suite, to collaborate and to really live in a digital world which is fully integrated into their physical world? So my big piece of advice is to start with that why. And it's important to find it. And I think it comes from your vision. So what is your unshakable vision? And I love this photo of this little chap here with his Chromebook, and look how happy he is and excited he is. And sometimes when we're teachers, we actually have to do all of that. We have to do that integration of all this technology. We have to put it into our learning design. We have to make sure that it's used effectively. All of these kind of things. And sometimes, as Angela Watson says, is when you teach, you don't always get a short-term reward, but you do leave a legacy. You have a choice about what that legacy will be. So do your teachers, or do you want to be that person who is like, oh, this is too much hard work? Or do you want to be that person who is, you know what, I might go through this struggle, and how do I integrate this technology in my classrooms? How do I change my pedagogy to reflect that? And when you work through that, and I think this is an important thing for leadership to be able to recognize, is to say, okay, so we know this is going to be a bit rough. We know it can be tricky. We know technology sometimes lets us down, but we're going to work through it. And the legacy will be that in the future, that technology is the new norm, and we can explore different spaces around pedagogy and technology. Having an unshakable vision, sorry for switching my slides too quickly, is super important. And I've got one which I'm going to kind of share with you, which I think is pretty standard, but it kind of, for me, is super important to state this. And we often have it on our websites, and we often have it on our walls in receptions. But are we doing it? Where are the deliberate places around the school where we're enacting this vision? So helping our young people to develop the knowledge, mindset, skill set, and tools necessary to flourish now and into the future. And like for me, that would sit pretty well. So having that as my why. So why are we doing this? Because it's helping our young people to develop the knowledge, mindset, skill set, and tools necessary to flourish now and into the future. That vision, and maybe it's something we shouldn't be doing. But this is important to build this together. I think one of the things in terms of managing change in leadership and the challenge of leading that change is when we go top down. And I know I'm speaking to the converted here, and I don't want to patronize anybody, but the importance of building this vision together is immense. So I would really, really recommend that revisit your vision with your staff and say, what are we really, really trying to achieve? And in terms of leading that change, it simply means that you are engaging, co-constructing, building this vision together. So everyone has a say, everyone gets into that vision, everyone owns that vision. So then when you are leading transformative change to that vision. Why are we doing this? Because it is supporting our vision. And if we're doing it because it's a brand new shiny tool and it looks cool, that's not necessarily supporting our vision. I'm not saying that innovation shouldn't happen and exploration shouldn't happen, but if you want to lead real transformative, long-lasting change, it needs to be linked to that vision. Diagram here. I've got a great question from Mr. Poole. I'll jump on that question in a tick. But once you have your vision, once you have your leadership and co-construction of that vision, that is what helps you to change culture. Because at the end of the day, leadership of change is actually about leadership within a culture which accepts change, which accepts transformation, which accepts innovation. And I think, yeah, I'll jump on that question really quickly from Mr. Poole, who says, I'm a relatively new teacher and a part of the team leading technological change in the school are predominantly older teachers who resist technology. How do you suggest I effectively lead change from below without making people angry or causing them to shut off from that technology further? Absolutely, Mr. Poole. I think the interesting thing about I've met a lot of younger teachers who resist technology. I don't think it's always necessarily about age. It's certainly about mindset. And I think ensuring that that technology links to effective learning, supports those teachers in becoming more efficient are the ways that you can show them. Some people will jump on and adopt technology because they naturally love technology and they want to, and they have an innovative and transformative mindset anyway. Some people do, and I'm sure these people are very effective teachers in their own right, how this technology can help. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at that now. So I'll leave that question for now. And this is it. And I guess this kind of segues nicely. So thank you for that, Mr. Poole. Is the number one thing for me about technology and leading that change within a technological framework is learning, or if it doesn't make my life easier, give me back time, then what's the point of it? And I don't go and talk to teachers. I very rarely go and talk to teachers purely about technology. And I think that the really important bit of going and working with your teams, and just coming back to Mr. Poole's question and saying, oh, we've got this technology which is amazing. I think it's going in and finding out the pain points of your teachers. Where are you struggling? What can we do to help that, and how can this technology help? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that, because this is the feeling that often teachers get, I think, is, oh, somebody's come in with technology. It's just piled on top of what I already do. Somebody's come in with the digital technologies curriculum a couple of years ago, and it's dropped on top of what I already have to do. And the problem with that model is that when we drop things on top of people, it's like Tetris. Eventually, those things will build up and build up and build up, and we'll lose. We'll lose the game of Tetris. And what's really important is actually how can, for example, when we're leading technological and pedagogical change, how can we ensure that we're making connections across, which really helps people to understand that this technology is not on top of what you do. It becomes integrated, and then you get a beautiful row in Tetris, and you're kind of like, yes, I've actually been more effective because of this technology. It's actually helped me do other things more effectively than just being an addition to what I already do. And that mindset is a really important one to change. I think the analogy of Tetris, think of that. So talking that language of learning, every single teacher I've ever talked to cares about learning. Like they care about young people. They want them to grow. And I think rather than saying, oh, look, I've got Chromebooks or I've got G Suite, which is amazing technology, it's saying, right, we know feedback's really vital. I know you spend a lot of time assessing and marking. So how can we use the technology that we've got to make that more effective? So I'm going to show you a really quick example of this. And this is an example assessment form in Google Forms. And what I've done is I've set up a form here, which is a blend of summative assessment and formative assessment. So in the Google Forms has improved and improved and improved over years, and it is a fantastic tool. So what I've got here is an idea of an assessment within a Google form, and it's got a video here, so you can watch this video on a volcano. I've just put that video in just so you can see that we can embed things like that, which is really useful. And then I've got some questions. And when it's beneath the earth, liquid rock is cold, lava, magma, pyroclast, or plasma. Now that's summative assessment. You either know it or you don't know it. Within Google Forms, on each question, I can actually set this up as a quiz in Google Forms, and I can say, right, what's the correct answer? So I can get some automated marking, and I can also put in feedback for correct answers and feedback for incorrect answers as well. So I've actually created this little bit of feedback here. So students are doing summative assessment through Google Forms, which is automatically marked and you get the data, etc. But it also gives them a little bit of formative feedback as well. So helps us use our formative, helps us use our summative assessments in a formative. A similar thing, we can put pictures now into Google Forms, which is awesome. And we can have them as a question option. So choose the correct picture of a cephalopod. Now, as you know, a cephalopod means a head foot. And what in here has lots of, has a big head and lots of feet? It's an octopus. So again, I've set this up as a question which has got an answer key. So the answer is here, and I've given them a little bit of feedback depending on whether they get that answer right or wrong. So we can create really powerful summative assessments. But what I'm really interested in is formative assessment. How do I use this data now to drive forward the students' learning, to help them to grow? And so my last question here is slightly different. It's how confident are you with adding fractions? It says, no, not at all. I don't know where to start. And up here, I'm very confident I could explain it to the whole class. And the reason that's there is I'm not testing whether they know whether they know fractions. I'm genuinely asking, how confident are you feeling? So we taught adding fractions last week. Let's have a little bit of feedback, because what happens behind the scenes of a Google form, so this goes out to, when it goes out to, I'm on the wrong account. It looks great. It looks really pretty when you go out, when it goes out to the kids. But in the background, which is more important, is you get all of this feedback. Answered what? And I've used this form in training a few different times. And it actually also helps us to create a spreadsheet as well. So what happens in the spreadsheet, and I've got a feeling this is going to come up as being not having permission to view this, but we'll see. Within a spreadsheet, I get all of that data together. And what I do really quickly and easily, and I'll show you this using Google Sheets, is I can, in my spreadsheet, which is created automatically for me by forms, if you imagine in this column is going to be the confidence, and I'm actually doing this on the fly here, by the way, so you see how easy it is. So this is the confidence with fractions, with adding fractions. So this would all be filled in automatically by the form. But let's say we've got some kids, so here's Chris, we got Fiona, so we've got a few different people here. And confidence with fractions, Chris actually answered 2. He's not confident at all with that. Anthony answered 4. Fiona is super confident with adding fractions. She answered 5. And what I do with all of my assessment spreadsheets is I will use something called conditional formatting. So I jump onto Format. And again, you can watch this video back, so I'm going to go reasonably quickly here. I click on Conditional Formatting, and I'm going to say that if the cell is equal to 1, so somebody said very not confident at all, I'm going to color that in red. So I go, if cell is equal to 1, formatting style, color it in red, done. Now I'm going to just go back into that and add another rule. And I'm going to say if it's equal to 2, I'm going to color it in kind of amber color. So it's a traffic light system, I think you're going to see in a second. If I go to 3, so reasonably confident, then we're going to go to kind of a, let's go to a light green. So there's my traffic lights here. And if I am very confident, then I'm going to turn it up to like a nice darker green. And then if I am all over it and I can explain it back to the class, I'm going to change that to a blue. So this seems a little bit complicated. There is a little bit of a learning curve for it. But once people can see, I can set up an assessment in Google Forms, which gives me a summative feedback. It also gives me the ability to create formative feedback, because now I can look at this and say, you know what, Chris is still not confident with adding fractions. I can do something about that. Take him off to one side, match him up with Fiona, who can potentially help him and do a bit of peer teaching. So I can really powerfully actually generate real data and use that formatively, as well as doing my summative assessments. So I think by coming back to Mr. Poole's original question, I'm sorry, there are a bunch of questions here which I haven't answered yet, and I'll get to it. It's the ability to say, you know what, this will take you half an hour to learn, but it's going to make your life so much easier and so much more powerful for learning. So some really, really simple things like that can help to change that language. And then things like within Google, we've got some incredibly powerful tools. We can do things. I'll just jump out of here. Is if this was a student's work, for example, I can insert comments, which is nothing exciting in that, apart from the fact. So if I just do that, I can send an email to specific people by using plus, and then Chris at the training. So I'll send myself one here. So I can actually send myself, or this is somebody else, if you imagine, a comment directly and say, great, so kind, specific, and helpful. I love this, but think about this. So I can use comments to give some feedback like that really, really quickly, rather than handwriting them on a piece of written work. And I can also use some other fantastic tools like Screencastify. I'm not going to go through Screencastify. There are tons of YouTube videos teaching you how to use it, but essentially it allows me to use my camera and my my camera and my desktop, and to and record my voice. Just skip through all that stuff there. So if I had some work that students were doing, I could click on Screencastify. I can record the microphone. You can see that going up and down. I'm recording the desktop. I wouldn't record the webcam because generally it's pointing up your nose and no one needs to see that, but share that. This is great work, Chris. Just talking to myself here. I really like what you've done. Fantastic piece of work here. Think about changing this graphic though and do something different. So I can very, very quickly record video feedback. And you can see that immediately I see that video, and bish bash bosh, it's now recorded, it's now uploaded to Google Drive. I can use Classroom to send that link to a kid. So I can really, really powerfully, really quickly take away the pain of that assessment load as well. Now I'm going to go over time if I don't move it a bit faster. But yeah, there are two models I do want us to look at, and they're the Salmon model and the TPAC model. And this is super important. If you haven't seen Salmon, again, videos on YouTube which will explain this in more detail, but it's when we look at the use of technology, what does that look like? Is it just technology acting as a substitution? Is it making things a little bit better with functional improvement? Is it modifying for different tasks, or is it redefining learning? So a handwritten scientific report on habitats, if I wanted to substitute that just into a Google Doc, it's just typed. But if I augment it, it means that I can collaborate with someone else, and we can actually augment that by doing this written report together. By that task, I could do it as a collaborative Google slide deck, including graphs, animations, and videos. And if I wanted to redefine that task, I could have a collaborative Google Mind Map, including place, multimedia, and authentic audience embedded in Google Earth. And so looking at the practice happening in your schools and understanding that this is a sliding scale, eventually we want to use technology to redefine, but sometimes helping people just to augment is a great first step in leading that change. So if you look at the new Google Earth in Google Chrome, it is an amazing resource. So the workflow for me would be, imagine you've got, using Classroom, you push out a Google document which kids research on together about a species in this particular habitat around the world. They then get some data which they put into spreadsheets. They then take those spreadsheets from Google Sheets and import that data into Google Mind Maps, and then they import that Google Mind Maps into Google Earth and create a 3D spinning ball with the learning that they have made around habitats. And then you can share that with anyone to give them an authentic audience. Like for me, that is a profoundly redefinition of the way we can learn. But also, last thing now, so we do need to look at, okay, not every teacher is confident in their technology. You would hope most teachers are confident in their content, pedagogy. So how do we help teachers to make sure that they cover all three of these areas? What are your strengths and challenges in terms of your subject area knowledge? What about your pedagogy? And what about your technology? Because what we really want are teachers who are confident in all three of those areas. So again, there's a great YouTube video on this that you can have a look at, but it's a really important thing that when we're looking at leading this change, we're not just focusing on the technology, we're focusing on, do you know your stuff? Do you know how to help children learn in the best and most effective ways, and how technology helps you? So in order to do some of that in terms of Google, we do have the Training Center, which is an awesome resource, and you can get certification for that as well. We do have a couple of codes here which will actually give you, it doesn't cost a great deal of money, but you get 50% off level 1 and 75% off level 2 training if you want to have a go at them through December, and the codes are there. I'm sure we'll be able to share those out later as well. And the one other thing I would get you to look at, and one of our other talks by Mike Redding is talking in more detail about Transformation Center, but Google for Education Transformation Center is a great resource to help you have a look at vision, learning, culture, professional development, technology, funding, community engagement, and shows you different schools and how they've done it through case studies. So that was a very, very fast run through the challenge of leading change. My name's Chris Hart, and my Twitter handle is @chart. Please feel free to connect with me on Twitter if you want to talk a little bit more. Thank you very much.